So what we are looking at is the opening screen for the NCheck application. Across the top of the page, we can see there are two different types of jobs that have been configured for NCheck. So NCheck, just the same as Inline, is a extremely configurable program. So you can, you as a user can set it up to where your inspectors and maintainers can, enter information for IT inspections, as you see here, configuration tracking, all of the things that I went over before. And you can make it so that they're entering information that is valid for your particular platform. So they're capturing the meta information that you need to capture for recording your cracks or corrosion or whatever it may be, and not just generic cookie cutter fields. So we allow you the flexibility to put in the data that you want, as well as the rules that you want. So if you have certain criteria that needs to be met, you can configure the application to validate that. Okay, so if I click over to my IT Inspections tab, you can see that I'm presented with a list of different options here on the IT Inspections tab. So I can click the search button to show all of the inspections that I have configured currently. I can show just the ones that are awaiting NDI that have some holes that are awaiting NDI, or I can show some of the inspections that are awaiting the sheet metal team to take a look at them. Now, how is it doing this? NCheck itself doesn't have a concept of, what is NDI, what is sheet metal, so on and so forth. But it's flexible enough to where I can put in search patterns and I can put in rules to where I can allow the application to fit the needs of this particular inspection that I am working on. To the left side here, you can see there's a create button. So if the inspection wasn't already registered inside the system, then the mechanic or the inspector could go through and click the create button and do it what we call an ad hoc job. So let's click on all of the various inspections that I currently have downloaded onto this machine. Here we can see how many findings have been entered, whether it be a crack or a corrosion record or whatever it may be. Underneath this num data items, you can actually add however many fields you would like to this, and you can calculate those fields as well. So if you wanted to have a column that showed, okay, how many cracks are above my threshold of maybe it's a 1/4 inch, then you can actually calculate a column that looks at all the information that the inspector has entered and displays it here so that you can then search on it or filter it and just very easily configure the application to show you the information that's relevant to your inspection method. So as I mentioned before, each one of the rows that we see here is a separate inspection, or it's what NCheck calls jobs. So if I click on this job here that doesn't have any information loaded yet, then it gives me a list of different operations that I can perform on the left-hand side. So there are no records created yet, so show all records won't display anything underneath my job here. It will show me a preview image of the inspection area, and right now we're just using a stock photo, but for your inspection you would have an image here that is probably just pulled out of your tech data. So it would be, for the Air Force, that would be generally your Dash 36, or for the Navy, it would be a service repair manual. So there are other operations I can do as well. So if this is an inspection, and let's say you're inspecting 100 fastener holes, or maybe 120, however many it may be, you don't want to wade through a big list of fastener holes here. So you actually have the ability to do filter routines on the left here to show just the holes that are awaiting NDI, or show the holes that are awaiting sheet metal, or whatever you want your filter criteria to be. So let's actually just begin creating information for this inspection. So if I click create, inspection finding, and the first thing we're going to be presented with is the finding type. So I have the application configured to first asks me what type of record I'm creating, and then drive down to what is the required information from that point. But you may have already noticed that, from selecting that inspection, the application knew exactly where on the three-dimensional model the inspection took place at, and it also knew which hole numbers are relevant for that inspection. So we can see there's hole 6, hole 4, hole 5, so on and so forth. So it immediately takes the person who's entering the information, whether it's the inspector or the maintainer, to the region of the aircraft that is appropriate for that inspection. So let's assume we're creating a crack record. Click Finding Type, choose Crack, and then the UI will update itself to show me all of the fields that are appropriate for cracks. So I have a crack length, initial hole diameter, final hole diameter, so forth. What if I chose corrosion? So if I choose corrosion, then I have a different set of fields. I have a length, a width, and other fields that are specific to corrosion. So again, you can configure this to do whatever you would like. You can configure it to show whatever fields are going to be appropriate for whatever your inspection calls for. So let's go back to crack. And let's imagine that this part here, LGLW, so if I click on the part, or if I'm running on a tablet, I can simply touch the part. It will display the model name on the left-hand side. But also, if I want to set this as my failed part, I just click part number, and it's already there as an option. So I click that there. It sets that part as my failed part. And let's suppose that it is this whole H4 here that is cracked. I just use my place tool, click on hole 4. It automatically can detect that, okay, this is inspection point 2 and it's hole 4, and it asks the user, do you want to update those fields accordingly? I choose yes.
Question right now.
Yes.
Right now, up on your picture, there's a kind of a white box with black courier kind of text that has the model number, LGLW, and right above there, those XYZs, negative 12.3, 28.4, comma, negative 173.1.
Yes, those are going to be your aircraft coordinates. So inline is going to store all of your models and aircraft coordinates, and every value that you enter into it is going to be correlated to values that make sense for that aircraft. So we try to
that's probably the center of mass of that part. So if it was a big part and you wanted to now click on the far left end of it or something, the XYZ that you just are doing right now updates the XYZ to exactly where that crack is.
Exactly. So it's going to be this XYZ of that point that I clicked. So if I wanted, I can actually demonstrate, how it picks the XYZs. I can click on a different location. You can see how the XYZs will update accordingly. I'm not moving my damage point here. I'm just showing you how wherever I place it, it would update to the exact aircraft coordinates of that part there.
I think one of the things that we could run into is, like, let's say you type in that part number. Let's say we have whatever it is. Let's say we use it in multiple spots on the aircraft, of populating not just part number but part description. And we might use the same part number with multiple descriptions based on where it's used in the aircraft. I'm just trying to figure out how to make the field that would be the description field pick the right description that describes where that version of that same part was used in the aircraft.
There are ways of addressing what you're referring to. It's just a matter of how you set it up. I have it set up with a global aircraft in mind, but you can set it up on a more part-specific basis as well. And you wouldn't have your actual aircraft coordinates, because then you would need to be at that location on the aircraft, but you could have your localized part coordinates, and things would still work out that way as well. So what you're describing, you can accomplish it. You just have to set the system up that way. Okay, so let's also suppose we're going to enter a crack length. So let's say it was 1/8 of an inch. And we actually have the ability to draw the crack as well. So if we wanted to, we could draw where the crack was leading. You can also take a picture of it. So there is an onboard camera. So if there we go. So you can take a picture of the defective area as well and have it associated with that three-dimensional record. So let's go through and finish populating the information. So let's enter, maybe it came in with a hole diameter of 0.25. Let's say we make a mistake and we say it left with a hole diameter of 0.2. And then we're going to push this hole further along in the workflow and say, okay, NDI has done its part. Now we're going to push it over to the sheet metal team. We're going to flag that this is something that needs to be looked at by a sheet.
Hey, so, question on entry there. Crack length, you type in an alpha character accidentally. You get an error message?
Yeah. So, yeah, it won't allow me to type in an alpha character.
And so your keyboard is actually not active right now. If you click on keyboard there, that keyboard symbol.
So it is, this is the, it's enabling and disabling the on-screen keyboard here.
Okay.
So if it were running on a tablet, then I can simply just touch these buttons, or I can click them with my mouse. But if I'm running on a laptop or computer, you may want to not see that and just be presented with a custom user input box here. However, it does validate the numbers in real time, so it won't allow you to enter an invalid number.
And can we make these fields mandatory? Certain ones, like no option. Like when you bring this up and you record a crack, you shall type in certain values.
You absolutely can make fields mandatory. That's one of the things that we will cover as part of the administration session. And you can conditionally make them mandatory. So you can say, okay, if this is a crack and the length is greater than 0.25, then you have to enter this field, or you have to do this, things of that nature. So I'll actually show you an example right now where if I were to click the back button, it actually detects that, my final hole diameter is less than my initial diameter. And I just have a rule set up to check for that. So it won't let me save this record until I fix that problem. So that's some of the things that's an example of what you can do to ensure that you get, good, clean data when using the application. So what I would do in this situation, I would click continue editing, and I would look at these two fields here and say, oh, you're right, it's wrong. I probably meant for this to be 0.2, and this is probably 0.25. And then it will accept that record, which I can see here. As I mentioned before, we have our searches on the left. If I click NDI, it won't show any of the different records for this inspection because we just said it was waiting for sheet. So if I were a sheet metal person and I'm looking at this inspection and I click sheet, then I can say, okay, this is the record that I need to look at because this is awaiting, someone from the sheet metal team to come through and work with it. So if I click back, it's going to ask me if I want to confirm the changes I've made. Click yes. It's going to update and save the changes to the server. So that's a fairly brief introduction to the basics of how to enter information with NCheck. However, what if you're wanting to utilize it for configuration tracking? So not just entering the results of an inspection. One of the things that you can do is you can scan a barcode that is printed on any of your parts. So if you are part of the U.S. Department of Defense, then you're going to be abiding by the MIL standard 130N, which are these just data matrix barcodes that are put on all of most of your critical components. I believe all of the critical components have to have them. And NCheck has the ability to scan those and read the information that's present. So I'm going to click the scan button here, and it's going to, I have a barcode down there. So it detects all of the information inside the barcode. In this case, we're pulling up, I have it configured to pull the part number and the serial number. Click yes. Then it starts creating a configuration tracking management record to associate this particular part with whatever tail number it came from. So if there was a barcode on that tail number, you could scan it, but I think in general there won't be. So you would just enter in what the tail number was. Then once you save this record, you have an association between what part was on what tail number at what point in time, and it allows you to build a database of exactly what you have installed on your fleet. Now, you can also do that manually and skip the barcode process, but the barcoding just cuts out a lot of your sources for error. So what I'm going to do is switch over to inline now, and I'm going to open up my internal type configuration, and I'm going to open up those two jobs that I just showed you, the first being IAT inspection, and I'm going to remove it as a job. So this is a job type. I'm going to say this is no longer a job. And then I'm going to come to aircraft configuration. And this is no longer a job as well. So we're going to start with a blank slate from NCheck, and we're going to create a job pretty quickly. So I'm going to refresh NCheck to show that it will, yeah, so it's up to date now. So we've removed our jobs. NCheck will not display anything now. So the first thing we need to do is we need to actually create the information that we want to have associated with our jobs. So in this case, let's create an inspection for, I already have a few stored views set up here, view 1, view 2, and as you've seen before, one of these has a named region. So we need to actually have a stored view and preferably named regions associated with that stored view for the inspections that we want the jobs to be for. So we have the views inside a folder for each of our inspections. So this is the inspection 002. This is, and it has some views in it. Inspection 001 with some views in it as well. So under Turnable type configuration, we need to create a job type. And I'm just going to call this just inspection. And for an inspection, we need to have a, let's say, a tail number. So we're going to add it as a standard field. We also want to have an inspection area. So that's the inspection point. And we want to have a description of the inspection. So this is going to just describe, what the inspector should be doing, or what the inspection consists of. I'm then going to double click on each of these fields, set this as a job display field and a job search field. Now what this allows me to do, or what it tells the application to do, is within NCheck to display across the top column there this particular field for all of the jobs. So it's going to display the tail number there. And it also will allow me to search for different jobs by tail number by marking it as a job search field. Click OK. Inspection point, I'm going to do the same. Description is a text field, so I will display it, but I won't search by it. It's just a paragraph of text, so it's not something that we're going to search by. All right, so that is the majority of what we need for setting up our job. So if I click save here, then I need to determine, okay, what sort of permissions apply to it. This is going to be different for everyone's setup. You'll need to determine who should be able to see and create information here. I'm going to tell it to just mirror what the permission set was for the IAT inspection that you saw before. Okay. Now that we have a job, we need to actually record information for that job. Now, the way I do that is I need to create another trimable type, and I'll call it inspection data. So this is just a piece of information we're going to record in association with that inspection. Now, the way we link these two together is we create a linked field, and I choose my inspection, and I select all of the fields for the inspection. So now our inspection data type is linked to our inspection. And I'm going to add all of the normal fields that I want for this inspection data. So that's going to include, let's see here, as we had saw before, there's a finding type. So that's going to be crack, corrosion, so on and so forth. And I also want it to have a, let's see, crack length. Just going to add some initial hole diameter, hole number, part number. We also want it to have a location XYZ. Can move these around to control what order they appear in. And okay, so that's good for now. But I'm going to make these job display fields as well. So not the location, but some of the others. So with our data records, so making those a job display field allows you to see them on your tree. So when we went into our job and we saw the all of the different findings that were underneath it, we can see that meta information there as well by making these job display fields. So I'll be able to show that to you here in just a bit. Let's make this a job display field, crack length, initial hole diameter, okay. All right, so let's make this a job type. So under behaviors, under the behaviors tab, we click the checkbox for job type. That lets NCheck know that this is a, I'm sorry, this isn't a job type. The other one was a job type. So I have to make sure we go back and do that. This is our job data. Okay, so, but we do want to, our region name will be inspection point. Region shape, let's make that whole number. And what this is doing is we're associating the stored region, the named region name to the inspection point field and the name of that shape within each region with the whole number field. This is why NCheck was able to automatically set those fields for us once we click that that hole. There's a named region with a spheres there for each of the whole numbers, and it automatically used that information to populate that record for us by utilizing this mapping here. Similarly, when we clicked on the part, and it was automatically able to set that part number field for us, it's utilizing this mapping here as well. So job setup, we don't need to do that since this is just a data record. So we click save. Let's make it have the same permissions as our finding record from before. Okay. And then let's go back into our job and finish configuring it. Okay. So under the behaviors tab, we're going to make it a job type. and we're going to leave these here. We're going to leave this alone for now and then come back to it. All right. So now what do we need to do? Now that we have the actual data structure set up in a reasonable way, we need to actually create a job. Now there's actually a variety of ways that you can create a job. And again, a job is an inspection. So a job is a record that's saying we need to inspect this wing of serial number, XYZ ABC. That is a job. One way that you can create jobs is you can have an integration to your work card system, and NCheck will automatically create jobs whenever they're created in your work card system. Another way that you can create jobs is you can import them via CSV. So you can say, okay, I need to create all of these jobs for all of these serial numbers, and they will just automatically get created from the information within your CSV file. Or you can do it manually. So if I choose file, well, actually I can just click the button here, and it's going to ask me what type of trainable type do I want to create, and we're going to create an inspection. Let's see. Yeah, we're probably gonna have to reboot since we've made some changes there. Let me check the security permissions as well. Okay, so I'm going to restart my inline client in order to pick up the security changes that were made. Okay, so now we have our inspection option. And I'm going to just manually create a job. So the first thing I'm going to do is let inline know and NCheck what views of the model to utilize. Now the way I do that is by choosing the same the same asset folder that we placed the stored views in before. All right, so inspection points 002. Let's see here. I can add an image here to display, but I'm going to leave that blank. Let's say this job is to inspect tail number, 81003, and it's going to be inspection point 002. And again, in general, you won't need to do all of this. You'll pull it from your work card system, or you can set it up once and create a job template, which we'll probably go over in a different class. But with the job template, you can create these jobs in bulk very easily. All right, so save that there. Then within NCheck, I'm going to do an update. Let's see what happens. All right, so now NCheck has something. It's recognized that there is a jobs configuration available. So if I click my search button here to display all, then I can see the job that I just created within inline shows up here. If I click on it here, then I don't have all of the different buttons that we saw before because we haven't configured that. But I can display all of the different records, and you can see here where it's displaying the meta information of this job. And also if I start creating findings, you'll see the meta information there. That is what the job display checkbox does for us. If we didn't make that field a job display field, it wouldn't show those values here, like the inspection point, tail number, description, so on and so forth. It would just show, it would be blank. It would just show the type. All right, so go through and the same sort of example. You can see again, it's able to pick up the association that we did when we established that field mapping. It's able to update the location, so on and so forth. Now, if I choose crack, it's not updating fields to show, and it's not making things required, so on and so forth, because we haven't configured any of that. That's the way the old configuration was. Can enter a crack length, hole diameter, so on and so forth, just like before. If I click on here, same as before, can enter the part number. Let's go back. We can see that the record's been there, is created underneath the job. Maybe there's another crack that we need to document as well. So I can just quickly go through and let's say this is actually a patch of corrosion. And those won't be valid, but this will. All right, so now we can see both of the defects that were added for this particular inspection using just the 10 minutes of configuration that I just went through. We're able to have a fully working, albeit fairly simple inspection that the user can start entering data against. Click back. It asks me if I want to save these records. I say yes. It updates that there are 2 data items here, indicating there are 2 records that have been created for that particular inspection. And remember when I had mentioned the job search field checkbox? So that makes those fields available here. Tail number is a job search field, and inspection point is a job search field. So if I wanted to search by tail number, I can click that here and limit the jobs to just the tail number. Or if I wanted to search by inspection point. Alternatively, we could have set up the barcode fields for this, in which case there would be a barcode scanning button here, which would not be for data entry. It would actually be to find the jobs for that that piece. So this is often very useful if you're in either a manufacturing environment or if you're in a maintenance environment where you're working with a barcoded part and you have a tablet, so you just walk over to it, click the barcode button, scan that the part that you need to enter data for, and you don't have to do any searching at all. It would automatically just bring up the job that you need to work on for that part. Okay, so what if we wanted to make, let's go back into our job here and look at one of the records that we created for the crack. What if we wanted to make it so that crack length is required if the finding type is a crack? How would we do something like that? So if we go to our setup, let's close this here, administration, turnable type configuration, the same as before, and let's go to our inspection data record. And we want to make crack length required if finding type is a crack, right? So we go to crack length, and we have a required when. So if I click required, then within NCheck, I can give the conditions that it's required. So I click edit, and now I say, okay, this is going to be required if, let's come down to here, finding type is a crack. So finding type is a crack, then it's required. Does that make sense? So let's go through and let me show that to you. So we go back and let's refresh so that we can pull in all of the different changes from the server. So we're up to date. Let's go back into it. Oh, that's our corrosion record there. Let's go to our crack. Okay. So, all right. So right away we can see crack length now has an asterisk next to it. Now it has this asterisk because it's now a required field. So if I were to take this value and clear it out and then click back, it won't let me save this record because it says crack length is required. So let me go through and edit this and say, okay, what if it wasn't a crack? What if it was a corrosion? So I choose corrosion here. You can see now crack length no longer has that asterisk. It's no longer a required field because the conditions that we specified was that if finding type is a crack, then crack length is required. So this is how you can control, what values are required and under what conditions they are required. Okay, so moving on. What if I wanted to not just control that it was required, I don't even want to see that field unless it is a crack, because if it's a corrosion record, we don't want to see the crack length field. So let's go back into our inspection data, crack length, and we're essentially just going to do the same thing that we did for required, but we're going to do it for the visibility control. So I click edit here, finding type, and let's say it's available whenever it's a crack, and that's probably the only condition that we want crack length to be displayed. Click OK. Yes. Save. Now let's close that. Then we're going to do the same thing again. I'm just backing back out of this. I'm going to refresh. Okay. Okay, so finding type is a crack, so it's required and we can see it. Now finding type is a dent. Now crack length does not show up at all and it is no longer required. So we can go back out of this record and it doesn't prevent us from saving this record or leaving that record because that condition no longer applies. We are able to save this dent without that crack length being required or even visible. In addition to, required when, visible when, those are going to be your, your main features when you're setting up, how the user interacts with an inspection. But there's other things that you want to do as well. As I mentioned before, the filter down selectors and the ability to create ad hoc jobs and things of that nature. So let's drill down a little bit into the more advanced capabilities of what you can do with the inspection itself. So let's go to our inspection type. Let's go to job setup. So right now we're looking at the not completed, all just some canned operations that we automatically create for you. But what if we wanted to have a search that displayed all of the cracks? So I click the plus button. This is going to be a job search, and it's going to display all of the inspections where cracks were found. Or maybe let's say all of the inspections where cracks were found greater than a particular criteria amount. So let's click the edit button, and we're going to say find everything where the finding type is a crack and the crack length is greater than 0.0625. So we're looking for all of the jobs that have anything but the smallest of cracks. We click OK. Okay, we save that there. And back into NCheck. I'm going to just do a refresh. All right. So at this point, I'm sorry, let me go back. We now have our cracks button. So if I were to show cracks, it pulls up that one job that we have created because it has a crack that's bigger than that. So let's create another job. I could go through and within inline and create that job, but this is actually a good opportunity to show another feature, the ad hoc job creation. So let's go to our inspection again, and under job setup, the same place we were before, we're going to create another operation. And instead of doing a job search, it allows you to create new jobs right there within NCheck. So we'll call it create. Create a new inspection. And we want the inspections to be part of the UAV asset type. So we're able to choose what asset types you can create the jobs for. And we're going to load the same models from the UAV asset type there. Okay. And that's all we're going to do there. So click save again, close, go back, refresh again. And of course, your users won't need to do all of this refreshing. What we're doing is just making it so that we see the changes that we're making within the inline application immediately within NCheck. So now we have a create button. So create will allow us to create new jobs. So not just, or in this case, new inspections. So not just, the findings, whether it be like a crack corrosion or a record indicating that nothing was found here, so on and so forth. We're going to actually create a new inspection here. So the inspection is going to be for this tail number that I'm going to choose at random. And it's going to be for this information here that I'm just placing at random here. Okay, so created our inspection. If we do a search for all, we're able to see both inspections. The one that we've already entered some data for and the one that we haven't yet. If we use our search for cracks again, we can see that only the one inspection that has cracks came up because it's utilizing the criteria that we put in before, namely the job search criteria. Okay, so let's go back to our job setup. So we've added some job type operations here. We added a job search for cracks. We added a job creation capability here for create. And let's very quickly, I'm going to add a couple job operations here. And then I'm going to stop the administration class and so that we have a couple minutes left over for Q&A. All right, so the job operations, so the difference between the job type operations and the job operations is that your job type operations are going to appear here and they operate on your job type. So all of your different jobs here are going to be operated on. Whereas that bottom window, everything you create is going to appear here and it's going to control what you see in this window here, as well as allowing you to do other advanced operations. For example, open URL. Suppose we wanted to have let's just see. If we wanted to display a URL as part of that job, we can display, we can add a open URL link here. So this is useful if you have web-based tech data that you want the inspectors and maintainers to have access to. You can just add that URL here. It appears within the application. You click it, it's going to open up your web-based tech data, or it's going to open up maybe another online page that they need to complete a different portion of the inspection. They can have access to that there. You can also do things such as report running, which we won't get into here because it's too large of a topic. But you can conditionally mark the inspection as being completed. So once you've done entering all of your information, we'll add a button so that it can be completed. And we'll also add a button so that people with the proper permissions can reopen it. So if there was an issue with it, it needs to be reopened again, because once it's completed, it can no longer be edited. You can't add information to it. You can reopen that inspection. Let's also go ahead and show signatures. So everything within NCheck can be signed so that you have a confirmation that the person really did that, can sign off on that inspection or sign off on that crack or whatever it may be. So let's add a button to display the signatures. And let's also add a button to, let's see here, a search button, which will allow us to kind of down select for different criteria. So in this case, we're going to stick with the same theme and just call it cracks. So clicking this button is just going to show us all of the cracks that have been created for that inspection. So again, inspection data, finding type, crack. Save that there. Go back to NCheck and let's refresh. All right. So if I click this here, now you can see there are a bunch of things we can do on the left-hand side. So everything that we just entered, whether it be opening up a website. So if I click that there, it's going to open up a website. And it looks like that one's wrong. The URL I entered wasn't correct. I can display signatures. So if I want to, I can sign from this page as well. So I want to sign this job. I click sign. It records who signed it, what their job description is. In this case, I'm registered as an NDI inspector, and it records what date it was signed. Now, if someone goes and modifies this record after I've signed it, it will void my signature, and you'll be able to see that strike through all of the voided signatures. Conditionally, you can use this button to hide all of the voided signatures if you only want to see the valid signatures there. Now, I also mentioned that there was a search I just created that will display just the cracks. So we have a crack and a corrosion. If I click my crack search there, then it just shows me my crack record. I can click show all records and get back to everything. Now, if this job is completed and this is everything that needs to be entered for it, I can mark it as complete. And then conditionally, I can give it a message to go along with the completion status. This point lets me know it's completed. If I go back, it records the date that it was completed and who actually completed it, so on and so forth. But one of the key things about a completed inspection is that you can no longer modify the data. So as you can see here, everything is read only. If I click this, it doesn't allow me to modify it, it just displays it. There's a lot of other features that we unfortunately didn't have time to go over, such as the model tree. If I wanted to hone in on a particular model here, I can turn things on and off the same as inline. I can also jump directly to subregions of the model, show only, so on and so forth. A lot of the features that have already always been available in inline, you can now access in NCheck, which is very useful for when you're doing ad hoc jobs.